Thank you very much, Trevor. Welcome everybody to Petco's Design for Circularity, a look at local best practice. My name is Cara Levy and I'm the marketing manager at Petco, the BT plastic recycling company. Welcome to all of you. We have quite a large audience here today, and that just shows the great interest in the recycling space, which is very encouraging. The sessions that we host on Design for Circularity have always been important, but now more than ever, they have become vital. With the introduction of mandatory EPR legislation, it is no longer optional to design with circularity and recycling in mind. We are operating to meet targets for recycling and collection, for inclusion of Armpit, and we will soon be operating with eco-modulation in effect. These are big changes with big implications around compliance for producers in South Africa. So we hope that you walk away from today's session having learned more about how you can implement Design for Circularity in your organization. Before we kick off, here are some ground rules for this morning's proceedings. You have all been muted by default and your cameras have been disengaged. Lastly, we know that 80% of virtual meeting attendees regard flawless audio as a key requirement for holding successful meetings. While we have tested everything to ensure smooth transitions, gremlins are sometimes known to creep in from time to time, and we ask for your patience and grace should this happen. Please also note that the session is being recorded and it will be sent to you afterwards. Now let's have a look at the agenda for today. We have a jam-packed agenda for this morning. My fellow colleague will kick off after I've finished speaking, and we will have a look at Petco's Design for Circularity guidelines, the top changes to make a big difference. We will then be handing over to Chandru, the Managing Director of Extrupet and Propet, who will tell us about the current Armpit capacity, feedstock, and supply thereof. Then we will take a 5-minute body break before heading into our next topic, which is sustainability beyond the beverage bottle. And we have Bruce Turner from the Bespoke Amenities Company, who will tell us about the work that they have done to ensure a circular economy for their packaging. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from Havenga, who will share his vast knowledge about the available sustainable labeling solutions from MCC Label. As mentioned, we will then have a Q&A, so please insert any questions that you have into the Q&A tab, and we will get to them at the end of the session. To start off, I just wanted to give you a short introduction of Petco for those who don't know who we are. We are a registered producer responsibility organization, otherwise known as a PRO, and we are looking after PET bottles. Although we are a small team, our work spans the length and breadth of the whole of South Africa. Petco was incorporated in 2004 as a voluntary organization to minimize the environmental impact of plastic bottles in the environment, and has been steadily increasing recycling rates from just 16% in 2005 to 63% in 2021. We have financially supported bottle-to-bottle recycling, meaning that circular recycling and food-grade Armpit is now the end destination for 1/3 of Petco's total collection, and this is what we are focused on growing. We understand that we have come a long way, but also that we have a long way to go. The task ahead is bigger. We need to move towards a circular economy, focusing on design in order to achieve higher value feedstock and closing the loop for all bottles. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation identifies this as key. They believe that circular design searches for a way to deliver a product or service which is functional and made of optimum materials to deliver the best performance while minimizing its negative impact along its whole life cycle. Circular design principles have been included in the most recent mandatory EPR legislation, which came into effect on the 5th of May 2021. It's a positive step by the South African government to compel local producers to take responsibility for their post-consumer packaging waste. So what does this mean? It means that producers were required by the 5th of November 2021 to join or develop and implement extended producer responsibility measures. From a design for circularity point of view, it means that we need to achieve increased collection and recycling rates, and our members need to, firstly, include increased recycled content in their products, up to 20% by year 5, conduct an LCA on products by 2026, and design for circularity in order to avoid the penalties that will come with eco-modulation. In order to facilitate closing the loop, we first developed design for recycling guidelines in 2009 to assist our members to ensure that the products that they place on the market will be recycled in South Africa. Up until the introduction of mandatory EPR, these guidelines were used as best practice. Now we will see the implementation of eco-modulation, as I mentioned. The use of regulatory instruments being applied as drivers to drive change likely through a bonus and malus system, meaning that packaging that is difficult to recycle will incur a higher EPR fee. This will have financial implications for businesses. These guidelines will no longer be a nice to have or a nice to follow, but a roadmap to achieving regulatory compliance. We now have targets for Armpit inclusion, and the guidelines will play a much more pivotal role. There have, however, been some small wins along the way. As we say, a small change in design can have a huge impact on the system. Firstly, PVC cap liners were discontinued, meaning that the caps would go through the PET recycling process. Many bottles have undergone lightweighting, decreasing the amount of plastic used. Sprite bottles have moved from green to clear PET, increasing their value. And one of our members, Happy Culture Kombucha, removed their metallized labels, meaning that their bottles could also be recycled. So how can you get there? I will now hand over to my colleague Junaid to take you through our guidelines that highlight the changes that you can make to your packaging. Over to you, Junaid.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. And as Cara mentioned, I'm Junaid Francis. I'm the Stakeholder Relations Manager here at Petco. Today, I'll be talking about Petco's Design for Circularity guidelines and how you can make better decisions to ensure that your packaging lands up in a waste stream that supports a circular economy and not in the landfill and definitely not in the environment. So let's get straight into it. The journey of recycling for packaging does not begin with its collection, but rather with its design. In ensuring a circular transition for plastics and plastic packaging, design for circularity is among the key aspects, right? Compatibility of materials, easy separation, and the use of additives, among other features, play a role in determining the recyclability of a given product. Design for circularity guidelines are generally developed by PROs like Petco to help guide their members to make better product design choices. So these guidelines recommend what to use or how to responsibly use a substrate or a combination of substrates in a particular application, such that the resultant product is easier to recycle and compatible with the recycling infrastructure available in the country. These guidelines typically also highlight what not to do. And recently, there's been a move to talk about design for circularity, as the conversation moves to speak about design in a more holistic way. So in line with the new mandatory EPR regulations that Cara was mentioning that came into effect last year, Petco's view is that for packaging, the producer should be either the brand owner of products using the packaging, the retailer in the case of house brands, or the importer of goods contained in the packaging. This decision was taken as it is the producer who has the power to decide on the design of the product and ultimately then what happens to that product at the end of its useful life. So as mentioned, Petco has developed these design for circularity guidelines that are there to assist producers and designers to design packaging that is compatible with available infrastructure in South Africa. These guidelines are aimed at the design of PET plastic packaging in order to facilitate recycling. This is a crucial guide for South Africa's journey towards sustainable production and consumption. Additionally, these guidelines are driven by the requirements of the mechanical recycling processes in South Africa specifically, right? So going forward, some of the existing restrictions, particularly for barriers or opacity or color, may need to be amended as new plants come into operation. So, right, this is a changing environment. The suggestions in the document have been created to assist producers and brand owners to realize and appreciate that used PET material is far too valuable to be considered as trash, and to encourage the recycling of PET. So what are the aims of the guidelines? Firstly, it's to encourage designers and manufacturers of PET packaging, as well as brand owners and marketing teams, to consider the recycling implications of the products that they are designing. Secondly, it offers guidelines for those wishing to make their PET packaging more compatible with existing recycling infrastructure and therefore recyclable. And lastly, the guidelines provide everyone with adequate information to prevent their PET packaging from accidentally interfering with the current PET plastic recycling streams. So the image that's currently on the slide there is quite a neat synopsis or summary of the plastic recycling process, which is helpful for us to understand when we're assessing our packaging designs. So why are we here today? And thanks again for giving up your time to be with us here today. We are here to share our design for circularity guidelines. We want to encourage partnership with companies and designers to ensure that design principles are being adhered to ensure that the best results for the environment and for recycling stream in South Africa exist, right? We want to highlight opportunities for change. We want to empower everyone here to share these guidelines with people and companies you think will benefit from these guidelines, especially those starting the design process. And lastly, we want to encourage everyone to make these changes to the existing products and bottles if they are not optimal for the current recycling stream. So let's unpack the guidelines. We'll start off with material identification. It's important to know your sign, right? All major plastic components should have a material identifier, also known as a polymer or resin identification code, so PIC for short. The PIC symbol should be shown clearly and should ideally be molded into the container or bottle. The PIC, do not use the PIC1 for PETG, which is PET glycol, or PET PE laminate, right? Or PET with biodegradable laminates. For consistency, PIC symbol should be embossed on the base of the container. In exceptions, the PIC symbol can be located close to the base or printed on the label as long as it is clearly identifiable. Next, we'd like to talk about additives. Are additives being included for the right reasons, right? The inclusion of nucleating and hazing agents, fluorescents, scavenger, and other additives for visual and technical effects should be looked at on a case-by-case basis for the implications on the overall plastic recycling stream. Such additives which cause PET to discolor and or haze should be avoided unless means are readily and economically available to minimize the effect. I recently had an interesting discussion with a brand owner who was looking to kind of have these fluorescent bottles so that he could position his bottle as the highlights of a clubbing or a night out experience. And, you know, as Petco, we recognize that there are these kind of marketing needs and market share competitions that's always happening at the moment. But with the new regulations coming into effect, you know, we strongly suggest considering Armpit and the availability of making recycled content available. So although we understand the marketing challenges and the need for having bottles that stand out, we do stress the need to really consider what is recyclable. Moving on to the color of plastic, right? So bright color is the right way to go. So green and brown bottles have been recycled for many years. They make green, brown, and black fiber, strapping, and brush bristles from it. However, there's a limited market for those colors, and hence not all of them get recycled. So what happens is when you see any pictures of kind of litter or pollution, etc., you know, if there are PET bottles there, then they're most likely to be green or brown. You know, collectors get a higher price for clear bottles, and so are more likely to pick a clear bottle and leave a colored one behind, unless they have space to transport it. The best way to ensure that they do get recycled is therefore to make them clear. What doesn't get recycled at all are the white, luminous yellows, reds, and black bottles, etc. Apart from there being no market for them, the master batch used to make these bottles, these clog or block up the fiber spinnerets, right? And therefore fiber can't physically be made from these bottles. So recyclers often have to go through the cost of shredding them and dumping them back at landfill. Next, we're going to look at closures, your closure liners, cap sleeves, and seals. Right, so ideally, all closures, closure liners, cap sleeves, and seals should be recyclable themselves. We recommend no PET closures on PET bottles. You know, rather use polypropylene, HDPE, high-density polyethylene, or your linear low-density polyethylene. These have a low density and will float during the separation process, ensuring that PET does not get contaminated. Avoid metal caps on bottles as they are difficult and costly to remove. They result in good bottles being rejected in sorting systems. Additionally, any residual material not removed can damage the machinery as well. Consider tethering your cap to the bottle, right? In our webinar next Tuesday, we will be hearing more from an international expert about tethering caps to bottles. So be sure to register for that webinar if you have not already registered. Next is labels, shrink sleeves, and adhesives. Right? If tethering the cap to the bottle isn't an option, sleeves and safety seals should be designed to be completely detachable from the container during the reprocessing, slash washing phase of recycling. The use of PVC, polystyrene, PET, or PETG, as mentioned earlier, sleeves and labels should be avoided. Paper labels should also be avoided as they cause significant problems in conventional recycling. It is best to use polyethylene and polypropylene labels. Avoid the use of adhesives. Only where absolutely necessary, use water-soluble or alkali-soluble at 60 to 80 degrees Celsius adhesives. For self-adhesive labels, use glue that is designed to stay on the label and not on the bottle. And avoid foil safety seals that leave remnants of foil and adhesive. Metallized or foil labels on film are costly to remove, increase contamination, and have the potential to devalue the collected material. They also increase the rejection rate in the sorting line and reduce the yield. So here, this is a quick video that we got from one of our recycling partners, kind of highlighting some of the material that gets discarded and ultimately is going to end up in landfill. So here you can see how many bottles get rejected at one plant when bottles have shrink sleeves, metal closures, and have additives which are colored or opaque. This particular plant has to hire people to cut off their sleeves, and you can just imagine how costly that exercise must be, right? Many plants will just send them to landfills or won't even buy them from collectors in the first place, meaning that they end up in the environment, which is rather unfortunate. Shrink sleeves are the biggest challenge facing recyclers at the moment, and this needs to be addressed urgently to facilitate successful PET recycling in South Africa. So next we will be looking at inks. Think before you ink is our tagline there, which is applicable in many scenarios, but here particularly for your bottles and your design of your plastic PET bottles. So do not print directly on the bottles as it contaminates the PET and therefore deems the bottle unrecyclable. For printing of the date code information on the bottle, use lasers, right, which use no ink. Now we will take a look at other general components that you should avoid, right, in the design of your bottle. The use of other components of different materials like pour spouts and handles is discouraged as they often increase the separation costs and reduce resin yields. Avoid metal springs as found in trigger mechanisms. Avoid silicone seals as well. And the use of radio frequency identification or RFIDs on bottles, labels, or closures is also discouraged. Lastly, we move to closing the loop. The full circle starts with you, right? It's important to include percentages of recycled PET plastic in your packaging. So on the screen there, we've got the targets which are currently in the regulations for PET, right, for the next 5 years, with us currently being in year 1. And as Cara mentioned earlier, this is now kind of a legal requirement, right? So mandatory EPR legislation has outlined targets for inclusion of recycled content, including Armpit or recycled PET into packaging. If we don't design our products to be recycled, there will be a lack of Armpit and producers will not be compliant, right? The specification of recycled materials in the design of new products supports the recovery of plastics by providing a market for reprocessed materials and reducing reliance on virgin materials. Some advantages include potential cost saving, marketing benefits, and of course, reduced environmental impact, which is kind of what we're all here to do at the end of the day. So what do we want you to do, right? Firstly, we want you to design PET containers with circularity, the environment, the recycling process, and the available recycling infrastructure in mind. Circularity starts with a product that is designed to be compatible with available collection and recycling infrastructure in South Africa and aligned with the end-use markets that's prevalent in our region. The second thing we want you to do is to include recycled content or Armpit in your packaging. And of course, this is now a legal requirement. So it's not something that we also want you to do, but the South African government. And thirdly, be transparent about your usage of Armpit. And lastly, be transparent about the recyclability of your PET packaging. Essentially ensure that all your labeling is quite transparent about your packaging. So let's have a quick recap on how to improve the recyclability of your bottles, right? So use transparent, clear, and light blue colors. Do not use other colors, strong colors, or opaque colors, right? Do not use plastics with the same range as PET, same density range as PET, like PVC or PET with biodegradable laminates. Do not use any barriers and coatings on your packaging. For caps, closures, and cap liners, use materials with densities less than 1 gram a centimeter squared, like polypropylene or polyethylene. Do not use metal closures or PVC liners. Only where absolutely necessary, use water-soluble at 60 to 80 degrees Celsius adhesives. For self-adhesive labels, as we mentioned earlier, use glues that are designed to stay on the label and does not cause residue on the bottle once removed. And for labels, use materials with less than 1 gram a centimeter squared density, like polypropylene. Avoid the use of metal or paper for labels altogether, right? And do not print directly on the bottle, and do not use shrink sleeves as far as possible. So that brings the end to my presentation. I hope that you've got a bit more understanding and awareness of Petco's Design for Circularity guidelines. So thank you very much for your time this morning. And now I'm going to hand over Chandru to take us through the next section. Thank you.
So yeah, guys, good morning. Happy to be here. Always welcome the opportunity to share the experience of recycling as opposed to the theory. I think Cara mentioned in her opening that we've come a long way and there's a long way to go. But what I want to highlight today is how in some instances we've actually gone backwards. So not only is there a long way to go on that on which we've progressed, sadly, there's still a lot that we seem to have neglected and are almost going backwards. And I've put this date over here mindfully because the bulk of this presentation is from a presentation made almost 10 years ago. And the reason I've done that is really to highlight how in many instances we're great at talking the talk, but sadly not walking the talk. So from that, okay, Sod's Law seem to be stuck on, here we go. So design for recycling, why is it important? I think Junaid has done a wonderful job on highlighting that. But already back in 2009, the chatter had started. Pre-cycling is a new buzzword that refers to the act of knowingly buying a product that can be easily disassembled or recycled at the end of its life. I think a lot of this alludes to trends that were starting to form on behavioral change in consumer and being a little more mindful about products that they were consuming. And a survey, this is more than 15 years ago, conducted in the UK, where respondents felt it would be good if packaging contained recycled plastics. I think in the 15 years since there, we barely moved the needle, but in the space of the last year, the attention now around the subject, and especially around Armpit, has been such that I've never seen a time like this. And I think it's very encouraging that hopefully we can finally be meaningful about the targets we're setting ourselves. And definitely it's getting very loud out there. The single-use plastic product has almost become the poster child of everything that's bad in the environment today and in the world. A lot of the narrative, especially in mainstream media, can be incredibly toxic and divisive, to the extent that in many instances we make choices that actually do more harm to the environment than good. So even more is the need that, especially for those of us in the PET space, that we're designing products not to fail by design, but rather to be recyclable and ideally truly circular to become then the next bottle. Legislation already back, 2009 was talking about EPR in its form. I think a lot of it centered around the plastic bag at that time, which was being declared as a nuisance item. I think it's important for brand owners to be aware that that legislation still holds. And when I hear about engagement with Petco about wanting to go with a neon bottle, not only do I shudder, but I'm grateful that there is legislation where appeals can be made to government to declare certain products complete nuisance, because the reality is there's no hope of recycling it in our jurisdiction. And I think then Junaid and Kara alluded to the fact that Section 18 legislation is now law as of November last year. So the principles, I think a lot of it has been, again, to highlight how long we've been talking about this. Pigments remain a challenge. Fillers, not so much. I think a lot of that is phased out. But we do from time to time hear of possible projects looking at using these kind of products. More I've seen in the polyolefin space than the PET space. Fillers are usually used to reduce cost, but sadly at the expense of rendering a product unrecyclable. Color of plastics, obviously, Junaid alluded to it wonderfully. And thankfully, there's been change. We've seen the Sprite bottle in many parts of the world go from a green to a clear, but there's still bottles out there which continue to use green and brown, and we look forward to seeing changes on there, especially if we aspire to meet the targets that not only governments have set us, but I think consumers are more and more challenging brand owners. So it's good to be clear. Highly encouraged that anyone on the call that still have color in their stable, make the transition. There is an absolute feeding frenzy for clear bottles globally right now, which means recycling rates for these bottles will easily cross 60–70%. And I think in some jurisdictions where they have formal collection systems, hope to hit as high as 80–90% recovery. Sadly, the same cannot be said of colored bottles. So yeah, this is what continues sadly to still come into our factories. As Junaid alluded to, some of this has only one end destination, and that's the landfill. Closures, for me, really, really challenging, that we seem to have seen a regression on metal caps, where it was only used limited in a certain brand owner for liquor. But there seems to have been a sudden explosion of transition of certain liquor and wine products away from glass into PET. Not only do they then challenge the recyclability by using heavy pigments in the bottle, but they seem to insist on using metal closures. What that means is they've rendered their bottle or condemned their bottle to be non-recyclable. That means they will go to landfill. But worse still, they're endangering the machineries that run at recycling plants, the result of which is reduced throughputs, increased costs, which ultimately will manifest into the cost of recycled polymers at the end of the day. So if anyone out there is using metal caps, you can't stop using it fast enough. And if you're aware of anyone using it, I would really appeal to you to share this information with them. It is highly problematic. Labels, I think one of the speakers, Harry, will talk about this. One of the challenges really is on the shrink sleeve, as well as paper labels. You saw the video earlier. We actually encourage collectors of bottles to not pick up bottles with shrink sleeve, which means 9 out of 10 of your bottles are destined for landfill. Those that do come in to the actual facility then have to be manually removed. And while the bottle is then recycled, the reality is the label is condemned to landfill. So even maneuvers to make the labels more detachable or easier to detach don't negate the fact that if you are a PVC or PET shrink sleeve, there is no recycling solution for you in South Africa, to the best of my knowledge, which means you will not meet up with government targets, which ultimately means you're not compatible or legally compatible with the legislation. Thankfully, there's some very exciting work happening on shrink sleeves with multiple suppliers. We're hoping to do our first trial as early as next week on a floatable shrink sleeve. And I'll leave it to the label suppliers to talk a little more about that. We still need to iron out some details on how we're going to identify them when they're launched in the market, so we can distinguish them from legacy bottles or those who continues to use non-compliant shrink sleeves. But obviously, the big appeal and push here has to be the brand owners who have to force this change, without which it's going to be very difficult to get these bottles recycled. And in terms of what we're starting to see in more evolved markets, this is in the UK, before floatable shrink sleeve was an option. What they actually did is they redesigned the whole bottle to be compatible. So the bottle on the left is how it used to be, and the bottle on the right is now a well-designed, clear, colorless PET bottle with a polyolefin wraparound label and a polyolefin closure as well. So chances are a big portion of that bottle is going to be recycled. And as you can see, it's also made from 100% Armpit. So they've been doing this for quite a while overseas. Challenge for us was, could we do the same in South Africa? And this is now close to 4 years old. The good news is that we have demonstrated that it is possible. We have the capabilities. Obviously, a lot of debate about, is this truly sustainable? It's the notion that everything is going to be made from 100% recycled plastic means we're collecting everything out there, which is very difficult to do, plus doesn't compensate for the fact of wastage that happens in the process. I think ultimately where we might end up as the sweet spot and an achievable target is to have every PET bottle made from 50% recycled PET. Inks, I'm not going to say too much about this. I think Junaid covered it. The minute you print on a PET bottle, you have condemned it to landfill. It's very unlikely to be collected in the first instance. The ink purges when you melt it and bleeds into the recyclate. So it really has no value, and in my opinion, should also be declared as a nuisance item. Also, a lot of debate about biodegradable. I think Petco's done some wonderful workshops around this, and compostable. They're available for download. I'd highly encourage you to watch it. It is not the answer. It's what I alluded to earlier, that so loud has become the narrative against plastics that solutions are, in my opinion, many times doing more harm than good. I mean, I don't even know what this means. This bottle is 100% biodegradable, recyclable, reusable, made from recycled materials. I think we can switch off the lights and go home, quite frankly. So be very careful about going down this path without doing the science on this. Already back in 2013, in some parts of the world, like in the US, what I really liked was, having those who wanted to label packaging as compostable, biodegradable, or degradable, to also ask them to clearly mark not recyclable, do not recycle. So if they really stand by their claims, then I think this is the route we'll have to take here as well. A really, really big challenge, and I think Junaid was far too polite about this, but thank you, my friend, for highlighting. We are also starting to see an explosion of opaque PET coming into the market. This is so difficult to recycle that you can't even make a fiber from it. If anyone out there is linked to the dairy industry, please know that it's very unlikely that these bottles will even be collected. We're actually now starting to penalize suppliers who bring this to our plants at a negative cost to them. which means in reality, it won't even be collected for recycling. And what then still bleeds or leaks into our plants have to be granulated to then be discarded back to landfill. Opaque PET is a regression from all the good work we've done and is taking us backwards. So whether you're using it for dairy or any other use, the reality is opaque PET is designed to fail. So we're out there publicly. I think Petco is doing its bit. I'd really appeal to others to spread the message as well. Opaque PET bottles are unrecyclable in Africa. And what are we starting to see internationally now is, everyone's very happy to make claims on their packaging. I think we're going to see more and more life cycle analysis being asked for and data to be put forward. I think in the UK already there's some very prominent cases where large brand owners have been taken to court on claims of actually confusing consumers and making claims that don't stack up to science. Eventually, I imagine it will follow here as well, where claims of being recyclable will have to be backed up with data and with science. And already, this was something that happened over 20 years ago, where Nestle Waters, on the issue of the aluminium cap, did the study and actually made the right decision and converted it to an HDPE cap, therefore maximizing the ease of recycling. And to imagine 20 years later, we're going backwards, really is worrying in many instances on how certain brand owners are so disengaged or just quite frankly don't care that they think it's okay to go back to these bad habits. As far as us, and in closing, there's obviously a global growing demand for food-grade Armpit. It's really the only polymer that's demonstrated that it can be truly circular. While others are theoretically recyclable back to what they were before, they're awfully difficult to do so. So by the end of next year, early 2024, we hope to be adding in more capacity to ensure then the local offtake for food-grade Armpit is made by local production as opposed to importing. And good luck on importing it because there's right now a global shortage of it. So on that, I'm closing. What I'm very mindful of doing as well, as much as single-use plastic needs a lot of time and attention, please don't lose sight of the fact of what's really the burning issue today. It's climate change, to which bad packaging and pollution contributes, and be mindful that how you produce products and how you draw resources and how they then impact on CO2 emissions. We sometimes forget why plastics evolved to what it is today and why it's become so ubiquitous. It has the lowest carbon footprint. And if we go to substitutes of other packaging mediums, you may think you're being more recyclable, but in reality, you're probably doing more harm than good. So do the study, do the analysis, demonstrate to the consumer, to the authorities, that the packaging you're putting out is actually truly sustainable, and that we're not then emitting more CO2, which is already causing the world and Africa especially a lot of challenges beyond just packaging issues. So on that, thank you, appreciate it, and happy to hand over to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. So I don't have a fancy presentation like the guys before me, but I'll tell you a bit about my business. It's called Bespoke Communities. And we supply little mini shampoos and body lotions and soap bars and little guest supplies you find in most of the hotels across South Africa. Our clients are likes of Sun International, City Lodge, Legacy, AHA Group, so a lot of the big hotel groups. And it's quite interesting listening to the speakers before, because pretty much every single thing that was highlighted that you shouldn't do were things we were doing. And I guess I also found the plastic discussion completely overwhelming. We had suppliers in places like China sending us all sorts of strange options on biodegradable plastic and cornstarch and PLA and compostable plastic. And we eventually sat down and said, we need to try and understand exactly what recyclable means. And we sat down and we were introduced to the guys from MCC Labels, who introduced us to the Clean Flake label. Chandru, who spoke just before, has been enormously helpful and shared a lot of insights as to things we were doing wrong, which was pretty much everything. We were adding plastic and color into our PT bottles. We were 99% of our products were printed. And it took us ages to understand the design implications of what we were doing. And eventually we sat down and decided to redesign every single product we made to ensure that the product was fully recyclable, transparent plastic, using the right labels. And that's something to the extent of 2,500 to 3,000 products we had to redesign in order to make sure the products we were supplying to the market were actually recyclable. In our industry, it's also quite a difficult thing because you're very often branding for clients. So it's not just a simple discussion around changing it ourselves. It's trying to convince clients that they needed to reconsider the products we were making. And there's so much confusion in the industry. We'd go sit with the client and explain that we needed to remove the color from their bottle, and they'd say, but the other supplier said it's not a problem. And it took a heck of a lot of convincing and a lot of time to sit down with all of our clients. But we've eventually got there, and I'd say that probably 95% of the products we make now would fit in with what's required from a recycling perspective. We actually had Extrupet evaluate one of our products to make sure it was recyclable, to get a commendation that the products were recyclable. And I think that's really quite important. If you can do that, is to really make sure that what you're doing is the right thing, because there's so much noise in the industry and there's so much confusion. We then looked at the next step was to make sure our products were being recycled, and that's really a tough one. In most instances, our products are used in hotels, so most hotel groups do have recycling services, but very often when we go sit down and meet with the hotels, a lot of stuff was just getting dumped in the wrong bins. It was going through to landfill when our goods were recyclable. So in Johannesburg, we've implemented a process where we collect our packaging. So we currently collect from about 60% of the hotels we deliver to directly in Joburg. We're recycling around 12,000 of our own bottles a week. And I think to date, it's about 2.5 tons of PT we've collected and recycled. It doesn't sound like a huge amount, but our average bottle is about 5 grams. So it's an enormous amount of bottles we're getting back. And then we're doing it ourselves. So we're removing the closures, the polypropylene caps. We're busy reusing those. Actually, we clean them off, we chip them, and we manufacture our next batch of caps from the post-consumer polyprop, I guess. And then we send off the bottles for recycling. We're in the process of finding partners in Cape Town and Joburg to go and collect the packaging from our hotels there as well. And in all the new contracts with our hotel clients, we're insisting that any packaging we supply has to conform and be recyclable, and that we do want to collect the packaging. It takes a huge amount of effort. We have to go endlessly meet with housekeepers, dish out thousands of chocolate bars, convince people to put empty old packaging into the right bins, but we're really getting a lot more traction, and the guys are coming back every day with bags and bags of recycling at the moment, which has been really great. And what I would say, and just to speak a little bit about what Chandru said before, is it is such an overwhelming thing to work with plastic, because there's millions and millions of opinions. We're busy with an international hotel group now that are implementing the most ridiculous set of criteria which have no relevance in South Africa. It's to implement products that are definitely not going to be recyclable, and it's part of their sustainability drive. And it's really difficult. There's so much noise. There's so much confusion. Everyone's got an opinion. And I think what I've found from my experience is there's so many people in the industry that are incredibly helpful. Chandru being one of them, the guys at Petco that'll really walk you through the whole process, and it becomes a lot less daunting when you actually just break it down into a couple of small steps, redesign some things, and start to get some momentum. And I think that's, for us, was the most important thing. As soon as we started getting some momentum, as soon as our customers started to see the benefit of it and start to understand it, it really sort of snowballed from then, and we were able to redesign everything, and we're really quite happy with where we've got to. So yeah, I think it really does start at the design process, which we were completely ignorant about. To be honest, we had absolutely no idea how important design was in the whole recyclable, ensuring your plastics recyclable. So getting through that was good. And I think more and more, if you can offer very simple solutions that actually work, your customers really do appreciate them. And it's very possible to make these small changes that really do have quite a big impact. So we're really happy where we've got to. We've using recycled content in all of our bottles. We're reusing a lot of our caps, chipping them and using them again to make caps. We've found great partners in Impact and Waste Plan who are helping us recycle all of the material. So there are heaps and heaps of guys who are out in the market who really, really will assist you and take you through the process, and ensuring your products are meeting all the requirements. That's really everything from me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and well done on your journey. I think that a lot of people can take a lot of learnings from your story, and it's really inspirational that you managed to jump over all those hurdles and get to where you are today. So yeah, it's been a really great journey to watch from our perspective as well. So thank you. And next, last but not least, Harry, if you will take the stage, please. Harry from MCC Label.
Will do. Thank you, Kara. Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some ideas with regards to suitable labeling for PET containers. The topic has come up a couple of times during this morning's webinar, and I really hope to add some value to brand owners and packaging consumers out there insofar as what labeling options are available for them. Just as a bit of context, MCC operates on a three-pillar sustainability vision. We first of all look at our employees. We believe that engaged employees create a sustainable MCC. Secondly, we want to optimize our supply chain and production processes to obviously stay within manufacturing targets insofar as our carbon footprint is concerned, optimizing our business processes also to benefit clients, and I'll briefly touch on that a bit later. And then thirdly, and most important, is to look at label solutions that specifically addresses the needs of brand owners. Now, what is it that we can offer that is compatible with the waste stream? And then secondly is in demand from a brand owner perspective. Out of just some background, then also MCC offers a full range of sustainable label offerings covering all different packaging formats. For purposes of this call, we're just going to be focusing on PET, which is on the left-hand side. And as you can see, there's from pressure sensitive to stretch sleeve to roll fit to even a heat transfer label that's used in Latin America, as well as a stretch sleeve. So, and what is interesting to know, most of these other label offerings are already in use in South Africa. For instance, on glass, we've got very successful products that wash off on glass packaging. MCC follows an approach of local and global collaboration. We cooperate with global associations across the globe. We also believe that the solutions we provide need to be approved by the local recyclers. And we're fortunate to have a good relationship with Extrupet, and we also get a lot of guidance and sometimes a bit of whipping from Extrupet insofar as what we have to do. But it's all good in the sense that it contributes to a better product offering that we can offer to our clients. Just to conclude this section, we not just talk a good story, but we also act on what we do. There's clear and transparent reporting. It's available for public consumption. So whatever MCC says insofar as our global sustainability targets are concerned and the products that we offer, these things are audited and they are available for public scrutiny. Cara, I want to jump into the essence of this discussion, and there's two products that I would like to position today as go-to solutions for brand owners. The first one is what we call Recyclable for pressure-sensitive labels, and in that specific case, we've got a clear as well as a white BOPP film that we offer with a very specific type of adhesive. And secondly, we offer or will be offering a shrink sleeve label, which is in essence a floatable polyolefin film. And I think it's important to note at this stage that I cannot say too much around the floatable polyolefin film, except to say that the trials are imminent. We are literally days or maybe a week away from submitting it for final qualification. And we hope that it will pass Extrupet's rigorous testing and approvals process. So with that in place, we will be able to give brand owners the option of a pressure-sensitive label as well as a shrink label that is completely compatible with the local recycling stream. Just to focus a little bit on pressure-sensitive labels, we all know that the value of PET is out there. It's in its recyclability, as long as the products can be designed for recycling. So there's definite value in PET, but we need to make sure that we provide a label that can support brand owners to be legally compliant and make sure that their products don't end up in landfill. So the product that they put out into market with a specific label needs to be able to come back into the waste stream, be recycled, and hence the brand owner then becomes compatible and legally compliant. The technology behind Recyclable is quite unique in the sense that it provides a proprietary caustic washable adhesive that reacts to a certain temperature and to a certain caustic solution. And in the process, it separates completely clean from the bottle, and then also there's no contamination on the PET flakes. So what's important is that there's no adhesive that stays behind in the wash process. The adhesive adheres to the PET flake, and that gets the adhesive adheres to the film, and that gets removed. So there's no contamination to the PET flakes. We're constantly expanding our recyclable portfolio, just again to offer more options to brand owners. So we're looking at MDO films. We're looking at increasing the range for home and personal care. So there's a lot of development around the recyclable portfolio. Currently, I think there's about 8 products that we can offer, but there's always continuous development taking place. And in that sense, we're very keen to take advice from brand owners to develop with them maybe a custom solution that will suit their specific application needs. What's very important is Recyclable is suitable for a variety of segments, including your food segment, beverage, home, personal care, and it really covers the entire spectrum of PET packaging. Whether you look at a bottle or a punnet or a tray, thermoform products, Recyclable can be used on all those containers, as long as they are deemed for recycling. Also, what's important for brand owners to know is that Recyclable converts very well. It applies and performs like a conventional BOPP film. You can expect excellent print quality. It's suitable for demanding applications, and it still gives you that clear no label look that is so important when you make use of a clear film. It's compatible with the requirements throughout the existing value chain, recycling value chain. So there's no need to separate Recyclable packaging into a certain category and treat that separate. It's recognized by Extrupet, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, as well as the European PET bottle platform. And those qualifications took a considerable number of years to complete. So it's not something that you just simply go in and you trial it and everybody's happy. It really took a lot of effort for MCC to get these products globally qualified, but also locally qualified. Like I said earlier on, the adhesive remains on the label, and that ensures that there's less water contamination at the point of recycling. And I think that is crucial for the likes of Extrupet in their processes. Like I mentioned earlier, it's suitable for a range of applications: bottles, jars, thermoforms, punnets and trays. You name it, we can label it. What's also important to just note to the audience, and it goes back to one of the pillars of MCC's sustainability vision, is our ability to self-coat. We've got assets in both the US as well as in Europe. Why I bring this up is important to see the backward integration that we can offer to brand owners, whereby we don't need to, as a converter or a label printer, need to buy in material, which we then will convert and then supply. We can actually produce our own material, and there is certain advantages attached to that. What's nice is it's a consistent global platform, a chemical platform. The chemistry is all the same. So the same Recyclable that will be used in the US, which is approved by the APR, would be the one that's used in South Africa and approved by Extrupet. So it's one integrated system that we follow. There's a short summary of some of the films that we can supply. I haven't included metallized here, obviously for non-recycling purposes, but outside the scope of recycling that is available. And then also there's a strong drive to look at thinner gauge liners, release liners on your pressure sensitive labels, and also to include post-consumer content or post-consumer recycled content into those specific liners. So what's next? And this is the exciting part. As I said earlier on, we are so close to getting qualified on our floatable Recyclable. I think that will be a definite game changer. We believe that it will be the preferred shrink sleeve solution for the South African recycling process. I know that there will be others that will follow, but we believe strongly in our product. It's been in trade for a number of years in other European markets. So it is a good product, but again, it needs to be qualified locally. Otherwise, it is just a good story that we can tell. The other exciting thing, maybe not so much relevant for the Petco forum, is that we're also looking at expanding this recyclable portfolio into HDPE markets, where we will again work with leading recyclers in South Africa to see if we can get it qualified. It's a little bit more complicated and more technical, but it is a great opportunity to not only have recyclable for PET containers, but also for HDPE containers. So in conclusion, I want to wrap up, Kara, by saying that recyclable solutions are aimed at improving the recycling of PET, whilst at the same time providing brand owners with options to maintain shelf appeal whilst remaining legally compliant. So it really brings the three elements together in one. I want to encourage participants on this webinar to follow MCC. There's a multitude of literature out there. You're also welcome to contact me with my contact details as provided. We also have our Global Sustainability Director, Stijn Billet, who's been to South Africa, I think he fell in love with South Africa, and he's planning again a trip out in February next year if there's specific brand owners who would like to dive deep into how they can use MCC's products to make their products compliable with the waste recycling stream. Kara, I hope that it addressed the answers, and if there's any more questions, I'm happy to take some questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Harry. Great presentation, and also well done on the work that MCC Label is doing.
Thank you, Kara.
So, excuse me. We're now going to move into a Q&A. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, and this is to the whole panel, what is the importance of qualifying products locally and not relying solely on international accreditations? I think, Chandru, this is probably best placed for you to answer, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and answering.
Sure, Kara, thank you. I think one of the challenges we faced in the past is, a new product comes onto the market. It's got a glowing list of accreditations from overseas, some wonderful organizations that do a lot of work, as Harry was alluding to, and suddenly it's in the South African market and no one's picking it up. The reason for that 9 out of 10 times is that the local recycling infrastructure sometimes can't cater for certain products. So it may be recyclable in Japan, in Germany, and all of a sudden it's not over here. And there may be challenges around the collection of that individual item. So I think it's really important that any packaging supplier doesn't solely rely on international accreditations, but takes the effort to go to local PROs like Petco, local recyclers like ourselves, and actually run a trial to validate the claims of recyclability, failing which we have had experiences in the past where there have been unwelcome surprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to move on to a question from Bosede, which is, can Armpit plastics be used in pharma packaging? Chandru, probably for you again.
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, it is internationally. The Armpit qualification is mainly around food gradability and the level of decontamination that you need to be food compliant. I'm not fully versed on pharmaceutical legislation, and if there is anything in there which would go beyond that, but I am aware that food grade Armpit EFSA accredited, for example, is used in pharma.
Perfect. Then the next question, Bosede, if you wouldn't mind also just writing in the chat if you're happy with that answer. I'm happy to unmute people also if they would like to talk. So the next one is from Andrew. He says, Chandru, what happens to PET bottles with paper labels, and what is the loss of efficiency? Should bottles have paper or shrink sleeves?
So the first thing that's going to happen is no one's going to pick it up because on the list of the dirty dozen, so to speak, self-adhesive paper labels and paper labels in general are on that list. Thereafter, the one or two that might leak into the system will have to be granulated and discarded back to landfill. The challenges therein is you've then gone and paid for it. So there's an on cost that recycler will have to charge into its product. And number two is then you've lost productivity as well because you've had to eject it from your production line. And I think that's a very good question because the hidden costs of Armpit, for example, also partly center around these design challenges that have to be catered for in a market. I think if we want to have Armpit at more and more affordable levels, then it really all starts with the design of the product from the beginning. But great question. It's got a paper label on it. It's heading to the landfill.
Thank you. Next question is, are we advised to stop from using packaging printed in colors, or should we be careful when selecting color additives? That came from Ferdinand. I think if he is referring to additives, in our guidelines, we do outline that additives should not be added when talking about color, and we recommend that all PET bottles are preferably clear, and if not clear, then light blue. I'm not sure, Chandru, if you want just packaging in general. So I think, that.
Yeah, if I could, Cara.
Pardon?
If I could add to it, great question. The fundamentals of any recycling is collect and do what. So even though it was alluded to earlier that we recycle green bottles or brown bottles, we only recycle it to the quantum for which there's a market to sell, for example, the fiber or the strapping that we make for it. Once we've exhausted that, we stop collecting. But the really other important factor, and it's a great question that you've asked, Ferdinand, is if we think Armpit is expensive in South Africa, you don't want to know what they're charging for this in Europe. It trades at almost a 50% premium above the cost of virgin PET. And the dynamic around that's fueling that price distortion almost, is that it's a supply and demand imbalance. So what a brand owner is now realizing is that if they hope to have more Armpit to meet their targets and then reduce the supply-demand imbalance, it means that the bottle they start with needs to be colorless. So using color has challenges, but not using color has so many other benefits over and above negating those challenges that I would encourage every brand owner to stop using color altogether in their bottles. But great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandru. Then there is another one that says, panel's thought on how the informal sector can participate and support the work. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Sure, maybe I can share some thoughts on the informal sector in general. So, noting in the South African context that the majority of paper and packaging products is collected by the informal sector. I think if we look to strengthen the link between our recyclers, like Extrupet and etc., with the informal sector, we can move towards ensuring that we're collecting products that are well designed. I think if there's great communication between the informal sector and the recyclers, as I said, we're collecting products that are well designed. We're understanding what should enter the waste stream, what does get recycled after the recycler. And I think that then that information gets shared with the brand owners and the PROs like Petco. We begin to come full circle, and we can inform the brand owners on what products are being collected. We can see your screen there, Cara. Yeah, what is being collected. So I would say the informal sector does play quite a key role, and if we can keep informing them about kind of guiding them on what to collect and what not to, we can start to drive positive change for the brand owners as well through PROs like Petco.
And I think also just to add to that, I think that the collectors are actually the ones that often have a lot of the information. So if there are any households, for example, on this group, people who live in homes or who are interested in starting recycling, it's a little bit off the design for recycling conversation, but they know which products are valuable, and the products that are valuable when it comes to PET are the clear and light blue bottles. So households can support the informal sector by purchasing products that are well designed, that have labels on them that say that they are recyclable. And you can speak to a collector in your neighborhood and ask them which products they want, and you can support them by purchasing those products and giving that to them, and they'll then be able to take those to a buyback center to actually get an income from. Harry, I see you back.
Yes.
Would you like to add to that?
Yes, Cara, please. I just want to add to Chandru's response to Ferdinand. And I've got a lot of empathy for brand owners who relies on color that pop on the shelf to make their products stand out. And as a intermediary, think of the label as being that carrier of your brand. Think of your label as maybe a floatable polyolefin that gives you a full body cover in order to achieve your specific color requirements on your brand that you want to make stand out. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Harry. And Ferdinand, I've added Chandru's email address. Sorry, when my emails popped up, I was just making sure I was sending you the right email address there. That is in the chat. And then there's another question here that says, to the point on PET with paper label being problematic, we have the opportunity to eco-modulate the EPR feed for formats like that. Is that not the carrot we need to encourage the shift to access greater volumes of feedstock? Chandru?
Please no. It's a bit like opaque PET. If I understand the question correctly, it's like we're going to pay blood money to put out something that will never get recycled. And as Junaid alluded to, why are we here in the first instance? It's to take care of the environment. So I don't think eco-modulation sets the right example. We really need to drive change away from products like self-adhesive paper labels, because there's some very good options out there. And Harry alluded to, I think the label guys are now stepping up and providing fantastic alternatives to some of these products. So my opinion, eco-modulation is not the answer there.
Thank you, Chandru. And then there's one more question that says, what are the end uses for colored labels after being recycled? Chandru, that's for you again.
So that gets harvested in the recycling process, gathered, measured, weighed, and we're able to report back to Petco on how much we recovered. And we then use that to make plastic planks. And the beauty of that is the color has absolutely no negative effect on those planks. So, but for metallic inks on a polyolefin label, and to Harry's point, please do use label as the distinguishing factor of your product when all the bottles hopefully will be colorless and clear. So yeah, not a big issue for us in the on-recycling process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Then there is another one that's just come through. How relevant today is the discussion on virgin plastics pricing competing with the Armpit price? Chandru? I think you can just keep your camera on, eh? And stay unmuted. These are all for you.
I was hoping to throw Bruce a hospital pass here. I don't know if that would be the right one to throw to, because he's also a customer. But hand on heart, it's a very relevant question. I think we have to be mindful that sustainability is foundationed on affordability. Now, Europe can afford to pay a 50% premium. I don't think we can down here. The challenges, are all well known, especially in an era of inflation that we've been told is here to stay for a while. So, yeah, we have to be incredibly mindful of the cost of virgin versus recycle. But, let's not use it as an excuse not to do the right thing by the environment and by the targets that have been set. I think many times what gets me is brand owners are very public about their claims and the targets. Well, if it's going to cost a little more, stand by your claims, walk the talk. But to answer your question, we have to be alert to it.
Absolutely. Bruce, did you want to jump in there? I know Chandru was going to let you answer it. If you have any input.
It's just the hospital passing through me.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it's part of our journey, and it is a bit more expensive, but it's I think it's really important that we're using Armpit and we're helping create a demand for it, because at the end of the day, I really think the most important thing for plastics is the more demand there is for recycled plastic, the more people using it, the higher the price of it, the more likely it is to get collected out of landfill, and it is to get to the right places. If the plastic has no value whatsoever and it's just cheaper to continually if the commodity has no value, no one's going to reclaim it, no one's going to reuse it, and it's not going to get recycled as such. So for me, it's the lesser of two evils. You might pay a bit more, but long term and in terms of our ambitions with plastic, I think it makes sense that people are able to earn a good living through reclaiming that plastic. So it is what it is, I suppose, but obviously everyone's mindful of costs.
Thank you. And then just a follow-up question to that, it says, can policy set this right by taxing virgin plastics or interfering on price with policy regulation? Is such a thing happening anyway?
Yeah, it is. We've seen now in Europe and individual countries now, they're starting to roll out virgin taxes. And it takes different forms, but the premise is all the same. If there is a gross distortion between virgin and Armpit, well, let's tax the virgin to be higher cost and bring down that disparity between the two. So it is happening elsewhere. I imagine it will happen here more to force that change of behavior than anything else. I think in the UK, if you don't have minimum 30% recycled content, then you're charged on the virgin portion therein.
Perfect. Okay, there are no more questions that I can see. I've got one more slide that I just want to share. And if there are any last minute questions, I will ask them. Otherwise, we can all have 40 minutes back of your lives. I just wanted to end off by saying that we have another webinar next week, Tuesday. This was quite focused on South Africa and the local market. And next Tuesday, we will be looking at international best practice. We will have Stain from MCC Label talking about Project Holy Grail. You can go have a look at that and what that project is all about. It's very interesting and really at the forefront of design for circularity. We'll then hear about the trend of moving towards tethered closures from Marco from Husky. And we'll then hear from Mike Jefferson, who's a manager at EPRO, one of our international partners, who will speak about the governance structures around design for circularity. So I'm just going to put the registration link in the chat. If you'd like to register for that, we'd love to have you next week, Tuesday. And with that, I'm going to close the session. Again, thank you so much to all of the speakers. I know you all have very busy lives and have a lot to do. So thank you so much for giving of your time and your knowledge and your expertise to this session this morning. I think there was a lot of really good engagement, and I hope that there were a few good takeaways for the attendees. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. As I said, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar and a copy of Junaid's slides. And if you have any other questions, I'm going to type my email address in here. And with that, I'm going to close the session. So have a great day, everybody, and look forward to being in touch and hopefully continuing to walk this journey.